All right, here we are. It's last week, or not last week, but last week of content-based classes about HIV in education. Interesting discussion. Even though it was just over half the class, then we've used the last half to work on our final presentations. But yeah, talking about the role of education plays with HIV, and I think it's a really interesting topic, especially when it comes to global culture and how that can be a barrier for HIV education. Some interesting stats basically claiming that education does more for infant mortality and mortality in general than health services does. And that, if women got a secondary, I think one of the UNESCO facts was if all women had secondary education, mortality rates would drop like by 41% or something like that. One of the biggest things for me that really stood out for this weekend, and something that mirrors one of my other classes, is when can you say a culture is essentially wrong? In one of the readings, talked about how, when trying to instruct teachers about safe sex, like in seminar and lectures on sexual education workshops, people would just walk out because the content was offensive to them. And I mean, I know we have this problem in the States. We still have abstinence only schools. People are really squeamish at the idea of sex education, but I mean, at least we have data to acknowledge it. And I understand that, especially as in a society that's already been oppressed and exploited by the global north, by colonizers, for you to then say an aspect of culture is wrong. We actually had a very interesting discussion about homosexuality and how homosexuals are treated or acknowledged in these cultures. How can you just say from a position of authority, like, when do you have to stop respecting a culture and really just denounce a cultural practice? For me, I wrote a paper for my other classes was married, was female genital mutilation. I mean, for me, there's just no argument for the practice, but in a lot of West African cultures in particularly, and especially men, will say it's absolutely necessary and part of their culture, and how dare you as the Western imperialists try to erode another aspect of our culture. So it's a very interesting crossroads of how, I don't know, it's a very difficult thing to do, especially as a citizen of the global north. What right do I have to tell someone an aspect of their way of life is wrong? But in treatment of gays, female genital mutilation, for me, like, that's wrong, and I need to tell them that's wrong. And I don't know, maybe nothing gets done, but I mean, you can't just allow atrocities to continue under the protection of cultural sensitivity. So it's a very difficult notion to grapple with. I think we all, as a group, kind of got a little off focusing on HIV and AIDS and its role in education, but I mean, the cultural backlash in a lot of these communities because of it led to that discussion. So, real interesting discussion. Good way to end the class. I've got a lot to think about for my final paper, and so hopefully that goes well.